very much for coming in. Well, the scenes of wild rioting were played out around the world, and it's a fairly safe bet the world can now see Britain doesn't just do queuing. This time next year, London will once again become a global media focus for hopefully happier reasons as the 2012 Olympic Games kick off. But how much has our international image been tarnished? Despotic regimes may be laughing now at our own lack of order, but can we repair the damage in the long run? Here's Stephen Smith.
Centrepiece of the festival, London's South Bank exhibition opens on schedule.
In another time of economic hardship, the 50s, the Festival of Britain was staged beside the Thames in London.
Escalators carry visitors to the top floor.
For all the then cutting-edge technology on show, it was really a showcase of British values, such as resourcefulness and pluck. 60 years on, that event is recalled in another festival, which seems to offer a nostalgic view of the great British summer holiday, and perhaps a gentler time. This tribute to the Festival of Britain was supposed to embody similar values: optimism, the best of British in a time of austerity. But visitors coming to the country this week could be forgiven for having an altogether different impression of the place.
The way I perceive the whole week has been totally madness. Frustration, feeling like, you know, why is this happening to London? What's going on? I mean, not understanding at all.
It's quite unbelievable because I've been here before. I've never seen something like this. The kids are saying there's so much happening in Pakistan, especially Peshawar. And when we have come here, we have brought this disturbance here. So I said, no, it's not that. It's just a mishap. It's just a coincidence.
Our parents gave us a call and they said, oh, don't go to London. There's a little bit great trouble there. But we decided another way.
Good.
So we had a nice day.
And no regrets so far?
No.
This is what the outside world is accustomed to seeing of us, a royal occasion with all the trimmings. Foreign reporters who are based here have had a very different story to tell this week.
I think it was a shock. It was a shock for people because when they come here as tourists, when they come to London, what do? I mean, they look at the Buckingham Palace, they think about the Queen, they go to the usual tourist attractions, they see Bond Street, they do some shopping. And Britain is really Germanized and not really connected with social unrest and with social problems of that magnitude. So the public image, I think, has got some really big scratches through those occurrences.
London on fire, a wave of violence.
Whether we like it or not, the riots in England have been headline news around the world. The French were one of several nations to urge their people to think carefully before travel to the UK. While state TV in China took the opportunity to question whether next year's Olympic Games in London would be safe. Television loyal to Colonel Gaddafi in Libya portrayed the riots as a deprived people fighting a repressive government, while some other broadcasters in the Middle East said this was Britain's Arab Spring. Some Greeks have even been marching in sympathy with English rioters. They've got the wrong end of the stick, says a correspondent here.
They assumed immediately that this was a similar situation to theirs, that this was a middle-class uprising against austerity, against cuts. And this was something they could relate to. My job was to kind of explain further the nuances.
And the Iranian government has its own take on English events.
The British people have reached the end of their tether. They've run out of patience during these times of economic hardship.
What this suggests is that though we may live in a global village, what the English get up to in summer defies easy translation.
Steve Smith with me in the studio this time, the Chinese businessman and entrepreneur Sir David Tang, the Canadian editor-in-chief of the Foreign Affairs magazine Monocle, Tyler Brûlé, and the French journalist Nabila Ramdani. Thanks to you all for coming in. And David Tang, how do you think the world is viewing us now?
The images of the rioting and the burning and all the unrest I think, painted a very bad picture of Britain in the last few days across the world. Two things I would imagine. One, for the foreigner, and in particular, even the seasoned traveller, who used to think that London was a very safe capital, had to be amazed and possibly start thinking again whether in fact it was in fact such a safe place. And secondly, I think that dictators and the tyrants and the totalitarian states around the world must be absolutely having a distinct sense of schadenfreude, because Western democracy, which has been touted as the argument for civilization, and in the Arab Spring in particular, being peddled and promoted, is now seen to be totally vulnerable to social unrest and even more important, social injustice.
What about how China deals with dissent, though? I mean,
well, you
saw
my government there questioning whether London is able to handle the Olympics. And I've talked to a lot of Chinese. I wasn't in China at the time. I was actually in Europe. But when I talked to them, they, of course, are laughing in a way because they couldn't believe that something like this could happen. And so they are beginning to question all sorts of things in a sarcastic way.
I mean, if it wasn't so serious, it would be farcical hearing from, you know, Ahmadinejad in Iran and China's government on whether, you know, Britain's capable, London's capable, all that sort of stuff. What's the danger here?
Well, I think David Cameron's knee-jerk reaction to the riots is certainly going to attract an enormous amount of harm to Britain's international standing.
You think he's overreacted?
Absolutely. The possibility to bring in the army not only upset the Metropolitan Police, but it made him sound like some kind of insensitive autocrat. And you combine this with the muted idea to curtail the use of social media such as Facebook and Twitter, and it makes him sound uncomfortably like the autocrats or the behaviour of the autocrats which provoked the Arab Spring.
Do you think there's a possibility of a massive overreaction here, more legislation? I mean, do you think anything's actually going to hit us economically? Are investors really going to pull out?
You know, there was a lot of discussions been about, of course, the poor Malaysian student, and that was certainly one of the most striking images from the week. But if I look at a second image, it's one which goes to the second biggest investors in this country, which is Japan. And we had that smouldering distribution center of Sony, but the image around the world, which was on NHK, was Oni. And I think that there will be some board meetings, end of Q3, quarter 4, where people will be thinking, what are we going to do? What will our investment strategy be in this country next year, for sure?
Especially from the point of view of the Japanese, as we saw that soon after their disaster, there was absolutely hardly any looting, and everybody was behaving.
But hang on a sec, these are the same Japanese or the same Koreans or the same Americans that have been watching our royal wedding, that have given us extraordinary...
That's why they want to see something bad. Unfortunately, in the world today, when you have burning images of burning cars allowed by the police to carry on and let looters loot and so forth, unfortunately, those images are indelible. And they will be repeated.
They're also risk-averse society.
Okay, Nabila, you looked through the Paris riots of 2005. I mean, how, you know, would you say those are now indelible? People don't say, oh, my goodness, I'm not going to Paris because those riots 6 years ago.
Well, the riots certainly damaged the reputation of the city of Paris and made it appear as a very dangerous city, as a turbulent city. And I'm afraid it's the kind of thing that will happen to the reputation of the city of London. And I think, as David was saying, I think the pictures and the footage of arson was perhaps the most depressing aspect of what has been going on, because you cannot have a worse image, of a nihilistic image.
I don't think it's arson, because you didn't actually see somebody torch a building, but the images of people smashing up shops and looting, and the police standing by, rightly or wrongly, that sent very bad...
It was the failure, what you're saying is that it was the failure of the institutions to take control, not of what the people did.
People couldn't believe that the Bobby, the great Metropolitan Police, Scotland Yard, Sherlock Holmes...
this is a very old-fashioned idea. You know, your image
are old-fashioned. You are here in a very modern way. People outside of Britain have a very typical version, an understanding of what Britain is. And for them to see that happening did, I think, irreparable damage.
Does Britain need to go on a PR offensive now? I mean, is that credible? Next year we've got the Olympics, we've got the Golden Jubilee.
No, not today. The last thing the country needs to do right now is to actually go and buy up lots of airtime on BBC World and CNN saying how great it is, even though there's a bit of that going on anyway. I think what needs to happen is people need to see a plan. If you look at, I think, an international investor community, I think they want to know what's going to happen with, youth unemployment at 20%. If I'm going to invest in this country, I'm going to set up a semiconductor plant, I want to make sure there's a trained workforce here. And I think you only have to look at this country versus Germany. I think business, our peers, want to see a plan. We haven't heard that this week.
Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.